Sometimes, a single moment of arrogance can change everything. What happens when someone thinks they're untouchable, only to discover they've made the biggest mistake of their life? This is the story of Marcus Chen, a wealthy businessman who thought he could humiliate anyone without consequences. He was wrong. Dead wrong. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as tourists began gathering for the changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood Marcus Chen, a 42-year-old tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, adjusting his expensive watch and checking his phone for the 100th time that morning. His designer clothes and confident swagger made him stand out among the crowd of excited visitors, but not in a good way. Marcus had built his fortune by being ruthless in business, stepping on anyone who got in his way. He believed money could buy him anything, including respect. Today, he was about to learn a lesson that no amount of wealth could protect him from. The royal guard stood perfectly still at his post, dressed in the iconic red tunic and tall bearskin hat. His name was James Mitchell, though the tourists didn't know that. What they also didn't know was that James was a decorated war veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before joining the Queen's Guard. He had seen things that would break most people, yet he stood there with unwavering dignity, representing centuries of British military tradition. Marcus noticed the guard's stoic pose and immediately saw an opportunity for entertainment. He had been feeling particularly arrogant that morning after closing a major business deal that would make him even richer. The guard's silence and stillness annoyed him somehow, as if the man's discipline was a personal challenge to his authority. "Hey, look at this guy," Marcus called out loudly to the other tourists, pointing at James. "He's like a statue. Bet he won't even blink if I do this." Without warning, Marcus stepped closer to the guard and began making exaggerated faces, trying to get a reaction. When that failed, he started making loud noises and waving his arms frantically. The other tourists began to feel uncomfortable. An elderly British woman named Eleanor Hartwell, who had been visiting the palace with her granddaughter, stepped forward. "Sir, please show some respect," she said quietly. "These guards are serving their country." Marcus turned to her with a smirk. "Lady, this is just some guy in a costume. He's getting paid to stand there and look pretty for tourists like us. Watch this." He pulled out his phone and began recording himself making a mockery of the guard's position. He started mimicking the guard's stance in an exaggerated comedic way, speaking in a fake British accent for his video. "Look at me, I'm a royal guard," Marcus said loudly, saluting incorrectly and marching around in circles. "I stand here all day doing absolutely nothing because I'm too stupid to get a real job." The crowd around him grew larger. But instead of laughing as Marcus expected, most people looked horrified. James Mitchell remained perfectly still, but inside something was stirring. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to get a reaction from him, but there was something particularly cruel about this man's behavior. It wasn't just disrespect, it was deliberate humiliation, performed for entertainment. James had been trained to ignore distractions, but his military instincts were beginning to activate. Marcus, emboldened by what he perceived as weakness, decided to escalate further. He approached the guard even closer, now just inches from James's face. "What's wrong, buddy? Cat got your tongue?" He started making chicken noises, flapping his arms like wings. "Are you scared of me? Come on, do something, anything." A young mother in the crowd covered her child's eyes and walked away, disgusted by the display. An older man, a veteran himself, shook his head in disgust and muttered something about having no respect for service members. But Marcus was too caught up in his performance to notice the growing disapproval around him. "This is going viral," Marcus announced to no one in particular. "Still recording. Royal Guard gets owned by American tourist. This will get millions of views." He was so focused on his phone that he didn't notice the subtle changes beginning to occur around him. What Marcus didn't realize was that his behavior had already been reported. Palace security had been alerted, and several plainclothes officers were now positioned strategically around the area. More importantly, his loud disruption had attracted the attention of someone far more significant than he could have imagined. The guard supervisor, Sergeant Major William Thompson, had been watching from a distance. Thompson was a man with 30 years of military service, including special operations that remained classified. He had been monitoring the situation, waiting to see how far this arrogant tourist would push things. His jaw was clenched tight as he observed Marcus's behavior, but he remained professionally calm. Marcus continued his performance, now encouraging other tourists to join him. "Come on, everyone, let's see if we can make this robot move." A few younger tourists, caught up in the moment, started taking photos and videos, but most of the crowd began to disperse, uncomfortable with the situation. Eleanor Hartwell approached Marcus once more, this time with her granddaughter safely behind her. "Sir, I'm asking you politely to stop this behavior. You're being disrespectful to a man who has likely risked his life for his country." Marcus laughed coldly. "Listen, Grandma, I don't know how things work in your little country, but where I come from, if you can't handle a little joke, you shouldn't be in public. This guy signed up to be a tourist attraction. Deal with it." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. Her late husband had been a Royal Marine who died serving his country, and her own son was currently deployed overseas. The disrespect Marcus was showing wasn't just toward the guard, it was toward every service member and their families. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with emotion. "These guards are active military personnel. They've served in combat zones, lost friends, sacrificed more than you could ever understand, and you're treating this like it's some kind of game." Marcus rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, spare me the sob story. Everyone knows these guys are just for show. They're like the guys in Mickey Mouse costumes at Disneyland. It's all fake." That comment was the final straw for several people in the crowd. A man who identified himself as a former army officer stepped forward, his face red with anger. "That's enough. You need to stop this immediately and show some respect." But Marcus was beyond reason now. The attention, even negative attention, was feeding his ego. He felt powerful, important, like he was the star of his own show. He decided to make one final gesture that would cap off his performance perfectly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, waving it in front of James's face. "Here, soldier boy. Maybe this will help you find your voice. I bet you don't make in a month what I spend on lunch." The crowd gasped. Even the younger tourists who had been taking photos stopped and stared in shock. Someone offering money to a royal guard was not just disrespectful. It was deeply insulting to the entire institution. James Mitchell's hands, which had been perfectly still at his sides, began to tremble slightly. Not from fear, but from the immense self-control required to maintain his position. His military training was warring with his human instincts to defend his honor and that of his unit. Marcus noticed the slight tremor and mistook it for weakness. "Oh, now I've got your attention, don't I?" He began waving the money more aggressively. "Come on, dance for me! Earn your tip." What happened next would change everything, though Marcus had no idea yet. In the crowd, several people were no longer just uncomfortable, they were angry. A group of off-duty British soldiers in civilian clothes had been watching the entire scene unfold. They exchanged glances, their military brotherhood demanding action. But more significantly, Marcus's behavior had been observed by someone whose identity would soon shock everyone present. Hidden among the tourists, wearing simple civilian clothes and a baseball cap, stood someone who had been quietly watching the ceremony like any other visitor. This person had initially been amused by the typical tourist behavior, but Marcus's escalating disrespect had caught their full attention. As Marcus continued his degrading performance, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around him, he made one final mistake that would seal his fate. He decided to physically interact with the guard, reaching out to touch James's uniform, as if he were indeed a statue in a museum. "Let's see if this thing is real," Marcus said, extending his hand toward the guard's chest. In that moment, everything changed. James Mitchell's training kicked in, his military instincts finally overriding his ceremonial duties. But before he could react, something even more dramatic happened. "That's quite enough," said a calm but unmistakably authoritative voice from behind Marcus. Marcus turned around, annoyed at being interrupted at the climax of his performance. What he saw standing before him would haunt him for the rest of his life, though he didn't recognize the significance yet. The person addressing him appeared to be just another tourist, but there was something in their bearing, their tone, and the immediate reaction of the crowd that suggested otherwise. Palace security officers were suddenly moving with purpose, positioning themselves strategically around the area. "Excuse me?" Marcus said rudely. "I'm in the middle of something here. Mind your own business." The stranger smiled politely but firmly. "I'm afraid this is my business. And you, sir, are about to learn a very important lesson about respect." Marcus looked around, confused by the sudden tension in the air. The crowd had gone completely silent, and even James Mitchell seemed to be struggling to maintain his ceremonial stillness. Something was happening, but Marcus's arrogance blinded him to the gravity of the situation. "Look, whoever you are," Marcus said dismissively, "I don't know what your problem is, but I'm just having some fun with the entertainment here. It's not like this guy is real military or anything." The stranger's expression hardened slightly. "Not real military?" They repeated quietly. "Guard Mitchell here served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He's been awarded the Military Cross for gallantry under fire. He once carried 2 wounded soldiers to safety while under enemy fire for 6 hours straight." Marcus laughed nervously, but there was something about the way this information was delivered that made him uncomfortable. "How would you know all that?" "Because," the stranger said, removing their baseball cap to reveal their identity, "it's my job to know." The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers as recognition dawned on their faces. Marcus, however, still didn't understand what was happening. He was about to ask another rude question when Eleanor Hartwell's voice cut through the air. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Your Royal Highness." Marcus's face went pale as the words registered. He looked back at the person he had just been arguing with, and slowly, the reality began to sink in. The authoritative bearing, the detailed knowledge of the guard's service record, the immediate response of security personnel, and now the crowd's reaction all pointed to one shocking conclusion. He had been mocking a royal guard in front of a member of the royal family. The stranger, now revealed to be Prince William himself, looked at Marcus with a mixture of disappointment and barely controlled anger. "You were saying something about this guard not being real military, weren't you, sir?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. His phone, which had still been recording, slipped from his trembling hands and clattered to the ground. The video that he had planned to use to humiliate the guard was now capturing his own moment of absolute humiliation. I didn't. Marcus stammered, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Prince William stepped closer, his voice remaining calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "Guard Mitchell, would you please recite your service record for our visitor here?" For the first time since Marcus had begun his harassment, James Mitchell spoke. His voice was clear, steady, and filled with quiet pride. 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, sir. Military Cross recipient. Currently serving with the Grenadier Guards, protecting the royal family and upholding the crown's honor. Marcus felt the ground spinning beneath his feet. Everything he had assumed, everything he had mocked, was crashing down around him. The man he had called a fake soldier, and compared to a Disney character, was a decorated war hero, and he had done it all in front of Prince William. But the story was far from over. Marcus's humiliation was just beginning, and the consequences of his actions were about to unfold in ways he never could have imagined. His moment of arrogance was about to cost him more than just his pride. It was about to change his entire life. The crowd pressed closer, everyone now understanding the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Phones appeared everywhere, but now they were capturing Marcus's downfall, not his triumph. The man who had sought viral fame was about to get exactly what he asked for, but not in the way he had intended. Prince William looked at the security officers who had quietly surrounded the area. With a subtle nod, he indicated that Marcus's behavior had crossed a line that would not be tolerated. The wheels of justice were already beginning to turn, and Marcus Chen's troubles were just beginning. The silence that followed Prince William's revelation was deafening. Marcus Chen stood frozen in place, his face cycling through various shades of white and red, as the full weight of his situation began to dawn on him. Around him, the crowd had grown substantially larger, drawn by the commotion and now held captive by the unfolding drama. Prince William maintained his composure with the practiced ease of someone born to handle difficult situations, but those who knew him well could see the controlled anger in his eyes. This wasn't just about disrespect to a guard. This was about disrespect to the military, to the crown, and to everything the royal family represented. "I believe you owe Guard Mitchell an apology," Prince William said quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent courtyard. Marcus's throat felt dry as sandpaper. He looked around desperately as if seeking an escape route, but found himself surrounded by disapproving faces and the subtle but unmistakable presence of security personnel. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by a growing panic. Your Highness." "I didn't know," Marcus began, his voice cracking. It was just a joke." "A joke?" Prince William repeated, his eyebrows rising slightly. "You offered money to a decorated war veteran as if he were a street performer. You mocked his service, his sacrifice, and his dedication to duty. You called him fake and stupid. Was that the punchline?" The crowd murmured its agreement with the prince's words. Eleanor Hartwell, still emotional from the encounter, spoke up from the crowd. "He was absolutely horrible, Your Highness, completely disrespectful to everyone around him." Marcus shot a panicked look at Eleanor, realizing that his earlier rudeness to her was now another mark against him. He was beginning to understand that this situation was spiraling far beyond a simple misunderstanding. "Please," Marcus said, his voice now pleading, "I apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't realize, I didn't think—" "That's precisely the problem," Prince William interrupted. "You didn't think. You saw a man in uniform serving his country with dignity and honor, and you decided to humiliate him for your own entertainment." James Mitchell remained at attention, but there was a slight change in his posture. The support from Prince William, the recognition of his service, and the crowd's obvious disapproval of Marcus's behavior had restored some of the dignity that Marcus had tried to strip away. Prince William turned to address the guard directly. "Guard Mitchell, you've shown remarkable restraint in the face of this individual's behavior. Your professionalism reflects well on your unit and your service." "Thank you, sir," James replied, his voice steady and proud. Marcus watched this exchange with growing horror. Not only had he humiliated himself in front of royalty, but he was now witnessing the very respect and recognition being given to the man he had tried to mock. The contrast was stark and painful. "Now then," Prince William continued, turning back to Marcus, "let's discuss what happens next." Those words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. In his business dealings, he was used to being in control, used to dictating terms and walking away from situations on his own timeline. But this was different. This was bigger than any boardroom negotiation or corporate dispute he had ever faced. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked weakly. Prince William gestured to the security officers, who stepped forward slightly. "Your behavior today constitutes harassment of a serving member of Her Majesty's forces, disruption of a royal ceremony, and conduct likely to cause a breach of the peace. These are serious matters under British law." Marcus felt his knees go weak. But I'm an American citizen. I'm just a tourist. Surely there's been some misunderstanding." "Being a tourist doesn't grant you the right to abuse our service members," Prince William replied firmly. "And being American doesn't exempt you from British law while you're on British soil." The crowd was now completely riveted by the unfolding drama. What had started as a typical changing of the guard ceremony had become a real-time lesson in consequences and accountability. People were recording everything, and Marcus realized with growing dread that his humiliation was being broadcast to the world in real time. A security officer approached Prince William and spoke quietly in his ear. The prince nodded and then addressed Marcus again. "I understand you've been recording this entire incident on your phone," Prince William said. "You mentioned something about making it go viral, about getting millions of views." Marcus's face turned ashen as he realized the implications. His own recording device had captured every moment of his behavior, including his most offensive comments and actions. What he had intended as evidence of his dominance over the guard was now evidence of his harassment and disrespect. "Your Highness, please," Marcus begged. "I can delete the video. I can make this go away. This doesn't need to become a big deal." Prince William's expression remained stern. "I'm afraid it's already a big deal. Mr. Polly Chen, and the video you recorded will likely be needed as evidence." Marcus's blood ran cold as Prince William used his name. Somehow, in the short time since this confrontation began, they had identified him completely. His earlier sense of anonymous power as just another tourist had been an illusion. "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Palace security is quite thorough," Prince William replied. "Marcus Chen, age 42, CEO of Chen Technologies, currently staying at the Savoy Hotel. You arrived in London 3 days ago for a business conference." The efficiency with which his identity had been established was both impressive and terrifying. Marcus realized that from the moment his behavior had escalated, he had been under surveillance by some of the most sophisticated security apparatus in the world. "Look," Marcus said desperately, "I'm a successful businessman. I have a company, employees, responsibilities. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Surely we can work something out." Prince William's expression didn't change. "Mr. Chen, I've met many successful businessmen. The truly successful ones treat everyone with respect, regardless of their position or status. They understand that character isn't measured by wealth, but by how you treat others, especially those who can't fight back." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. In his business world, he was used to intimidating people, using his wealth and power to get his way. But here, face to face with actual authority, actual nobility, his tactics were not just ineffective, they were making everything worse. Eleanor Hartwell stepped forward again, addressing Prince William directly. "Your Highness, if I may say so, this man was also incredibly rude to me and other members of the public. He told me to mind my own business when I asked him to show respect." Marcus closed his eyes, realizing that his behavior toward Eleanor was now part of the official record. Every rude comment, every dismissive gesture, was being compiled into a comprehensive picture of his conduct. "Is that true, Chen?" Prince William asked. Marcus looked at Eleanor, seeing her clearly for the first time. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes, dressed respectfully for her visit to the palace. Her granddaughter stood beside her, looking confused and a little frightened by the intensity of the situation. This was the woman he had dismissed as grandma and told to mind her own business. Yes, but," Marcus began. "There are no buts here, Mr. Chen," Prince William interrupted. "You disrespected a war hero, harassed him in front of children, offered him money as if he were begging, mocked his service and sacrifice, and were rude to innocent bystanders who tried to correct your behavior. At what point in that sequence of events did you think your actions were acceptable?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus found himself unable to answer because there was no acceptable answer. Viewed from the outside, his behavior had been indefensible. "I apologize," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible. "To whom?" Prince William asked pointedly. Marcus looked around the crowd, realizing he had multiple apologies to make. "To Guard Mitchell, to you, Your Highness, to Mrs." He paused, realizing he didn't know Eleanor's name. "Hartwell," Eleanor supplied quietly. "To Mrs. Hartwell and to everyone here," Marcus continued. "I was wrong. My behavior was inexcusable." Prince William studied Marcus carefully. "Mr. Chen, do you understand why your behavior was so offensive?" Marcus struggled for words. Because I was disrespectful?" "That's part of it," Prince William replied. "But it goes deeper than that. Guard Mitchell has risked his life for strangers. He's been shot at, seen friends die, carried wounded soldiers to safety. He's done things that most people can't even imagine, all in service to his country, and you treated him like he was worthless, like his sacrifice meant nothing." The full weight of his actions was beginning to press down on Marcus. He had been so focused on his own entertainment, his own sense of superiority, that he had completely failed to see the guard as a human being, let alone as a hero. "When you offered him money," Prince William continued, "you were essentially saying that his honor was for sale, that his dignity could be purchased. For a soldier, for anyone with integrity, that's one of the deepest insults possible." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. In his business world, everything was transactional. Every relationship, every interaction could be reduced to terms of profit and loss. But he was learning that there were things that couldn't be bought, values that couldn't be negotiated. A new voice joined the conversation as Sergeant Major Thompson, who had been observing from a distance, approached the group. His presence commanded immediate attention, and even Prince William acknowledged him with a respectful nod.
"Your Highness," Thompson said formally, "Guard Mitchell has been under my command for 2 years. He's one of the finest soldiers I've ever served with."
What this individual did today was not just disrespectful to one guard, but to every member of the regiment, every service member, and every family who has lost someone in service to the crown. Marcus looked at Thompson and saw something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't just disapproval or professional anger. This was personal. Thompson looked at Marcus like he was looking at an enemy, someone who had attacked something sacred. "Sergeant Major Thompson," Prince William said formally, "what would be the appropriate response to this type of behavior under military law?" Thompson's answer was crisp and precise. Under military law, harassment of service personnel, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, and bringing discredit upon the service would result in court-martial and potential imprisonment, sir. Marcus's face went pale. "But I'm not military." "No," Thompson replied coldly, "you're not. You don't have the honor of wearing the uniform or serving something greater than yourself. But civilian law has its own provisions for harassment and disorderly conduct." Prince William turned to the security officers. "What are Mr. Chen's options at this point?" The lead security officer stepped forward. "Your Highness, Mr. Chen could be arrested and charged with harassment, disturbing the peace, and conduct likely to cause alarm or distress. Given that this occurred on crown property during a royal ceremony, the charges could be quite serious." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. What had started as a moment of cruel entertainment was turning into a legal nightmare that could destroy his reputation, his business, and his future. "Please," Marcus said, his voice breaking, "I'll do anything. I'll make a donation, I'll apologize publicly, whatever you want. Just please don't arrest me." Prince William considered this carefully. "Chen, this isn't about what I want. This is about justice, accountability, and respect. You can't buy your way out of every consequence." The crowd watched in fascination as one of the world's most powerful forms of authority, a member of the royal family, dealt with one of the most common forms of power, wealth. It was becoming clear that in this confrontation, money was not just ineffective, it was almost insulting to offer. However, Prince William continued, "I believe in redemption and learning. The question is whether you're truly sorry for what you did, or just sorry that you got caught." Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him. Eleanor Hartwell looked disappointed, but not entirely unsympathetic. James Mitchell remained professional but alert. Sergeant Major Thompson looked like he was restraining himself from more direct action. The crowd was a mix of disapproval, fascination, and in some cases, pity. "I'm truly sorry," Marcus said, and for the first time, his apology sounded genuine. "I realize now that I was wrong, not just tactically, but morally. I treated a hero like he was beneath me, and that's unforgivable." Prince William studied Marcus's face carefully, looking for signs of sincerity versus manipulation. As someone who had dealt with politicians, diplomats, and business leaders his entire life, he was skilled at reading people. "Chen," Prince William said finally, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can face the full legal consequences of your actions today, which could include arrest, charges, and a very public trial. Or, you can accept an alternative that involves making genuine amends for your behavior." Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. "What kind of alternative?" Prince William looked at Sergeant Major Thompson and James Mitchell before responding. "That will depend on them. You wronged them most directly. They should have a say in how you make it right." Thompson stepped forward, his expression stern. "Chen, do you have any idea what military service actually involves?" No, not really," Marcus admitted. "Then perhaps that's where we should start," Thompson replied. "Your ignorance about military service led directly to your disrespectful behavior. Maybe it's time you learned what these men and women actually do." Prince William nodded approvingly. "An educational consequence. I like that approach, Sergeant Major." Marcus looked confused. "What do you mean?" James Mitchell spoke up for the second time, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, if you're truly sorry for what you did today, then prove it. Learn about military service. Visit wounded veterans. See what sacrifice actually looks like." The suggestion hit Marcus like a revelation. His punishment wouldn't just be legal or financial, it would be educational and transformational. He would have to confront the reality of what he had mocked.
"I'll do it," Marcus said quickly.
"Whatever you think is appropriate."
Prince William raised a hand.
"Don't agree so quickly, Mr. Gibbon."
"Chen, this wouldn't be a token gesture or a brief photo opportunity.
This would be a serious commitment to understanding and honoring military service. It would take time, effort, and genuine engagement."
Marcus nodded vigorously. "I understand. I want to make this right."
But even as he agreed, Marcus had no idea what he was truly committing to. The consequences of his moment of arrogance were about to extend far beyond this courtyard, far beyond this day, and far beyond anything he could currently imagine.
Prince William looked around at the crowd, many of whom were still recording the entire encounter.
"Mr. Chen's education will be public, documented, and transparent. If he's truly committed to learning and making amends, then the world should see that journey." Marcus realized that his desire for viral fame was about to be fulfilled, but not in any way he had intended. His story would indeed reach millions of people, but as a cautionary tale rather than a triumph. The transformation of Marcus Chen was about to begin, and it would be more challenging, more humbling, and more life-changing than anything he had ever experienced. His real punishment wasn't going to be legal or financial. It was going to be personal and profound. 6 months had passed since that fateful morning at Buckingham Palace, and Marcus Chen was no longer the same man who had arrogantly mocked a royal guard. The transformation had been documented every step of the way, creating a powerful narrative that had indeed gone viral, but for reasons he never could have anticipated. The video of his confrontation with Prince William had spread across social media within hours, making Marcus infamous worldwide. But instead of the celebrity he had originally sought, he became a symbol of arrogance and its consequences. The initial wave of public reaction had been brutal. His business faced boycotts, his reputation was destroyed, and he became the subject of countless memes and satirical videos. However, what followed was far more profound than public humiliation. True to his word, Marcus had committed himself to the educational journey that Sergeant Major Thompson and Guard Mitchell had proposed. Under the direct oversight of the royal family's office, Marcus began an intensive program to understand military service, sacrifice, and honor. His first stop had been the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, home to the Chelsea pensioners, retired soldiers who had served the crown with distinction. Walking through those historic halls, Marcus met men and women who had given decades of their lives to military service. Many bore visible scars from their service, while others carried invisible wounds that ran much deeper. One of the first veterans Marcus met was Thomas Whitfield, an 82-year-old former paratrooper who had served in the Falklands War. Thomas had lost both legs to a landmine while evacuating civilians, but his spirit remained unbroken. When Marcus first introduced himself expecting anger or rejection, Thomas simply smiled and said, "So you're the lad who needs to learn about service. Well, pull up a chair and listen." Over the course of several visits, Thomas shared stories that shattered Marcus's previous understanding of courage and sacrifice. He spoke of friends who had died in his arms, of missions where failure meant civilian casualties, of the weight of responsibility that every soldier carries. But he also spoke of the brotherhood among service members, the pride in serving something greater than oneself, and the honor that comes from protecting others. "You see, son," Thomas had said during one of their conversations, "when you mocked that guard at the palace, you weren't just insulting him. You were insulting every person who ever put on a uniform, every family who ever worried about their loved one overseas, every mother who ever received a folded flag." Marcus had broken down that day, truly understanding for the first time the magnitude of his actions. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him like a physical force. But Thomas had put a weathered hand on his shoulder and said, "The measure of a man isn't whether he makes mistakes, lad. It's what he does after he realizes he's made them." The program continued with visits to active military bases, where Marcus observed training exercises and learned about the daily life of serving soldiers. He watched young recruits push themselves to their physical and mental limits, not for personal glory or profit, but out of dedication to their country and their fellow citizens. At RAF Bryce Norton, Marcus met Sarah Collins, a helicopter pilot who had completed multiple tours in Afghanistan. Sarah had been shot down during a medical evacuation mission and had spent 3 days behind enemy lines protecting wounded soldiers until rescue arrived. Her calm professionalism as she described the experience made Marcus realize how inadequate his previous definition of courage had been. People think military service is about being tough or aggressive, Sarah explained as they watched training flights. But really, it's about service. It's about being willing to put other people's safety and welfare above your own comfort, your own desires, even your own life. The most challenging part of Marcus's journey came when he visited the Defense Medical Rehabilitation Center at Headley Court. There he met service members who were recovering from severe injuries sustained in combat. Some were learning to walk again with prosthetic limbs, others were dealing with traumatic brain injuries, and many were fighting battles with post-traumatic stress disorder. One patient, Corporal David Hayes, had lost both arms and one leg to an improvised explosive device while on patrol in Afghanistan. Despite his injuries, David maintained a positive attitude and was working toward competing in the Paralympics. When Marcus asked how he stayed so optimistic, David's response changed his perspective forever. "Chen," David said, "I didn't lose my limbs, I gave them. There's a difference. I gave them so that the people back home could sleep safely, so children could go to school without fear, so families could live in peace. That trade was worth it to me then, and it's worth it to me now." Marcus spent hours with David and other wounded veterans, learning about their injuries, their recovery processes, and their continued dedication to serving others. Many of them had started charities, worked with other veterans, or found new ways to contribute to society despite their physical limitations. The experience fundamentally changed how Marcus understood strength, sacrifice, and success. These men and women had given pieces of themselves for strangers, for abstract concepts like freedom and democracy, for people they would never meet. They had found meaning and purpose in service to others, something Marcus had never experienced in all his business success. As part of his education, Marcus also participated in a modified military training program designed to give civilians a taste of what service members experience. The physical demands were brutal for someone accustomed to boardroom meetings and luxury hotels. He struggled through obstacle courses, endured sleep deprivation, and learned to work as part of a team rather than as an individual leader. During one particularly challenging exercise, Marcus collapsed from exhaustion and wanted to quit. His instructor, a sergeant who had initially been skeptical of Marcus's commitment, pulled him aside for a conversation that became a turning point. "Mr. Chen," the sergeant said, "every person who wears this uniform has felt what you're feeling right now. The difference is they pushed through it because they knew something bigger than themselves was depending on them. The question is, what's bigger than you?" That question haunted Marcus for weeks. In his business career, everything had been about him, his success, his wealth, his recognition. But these service members had found something greater to dedicate their lives to, and that dedication had given their lives a meaning that all his money couldn't purchase. The transformation wasn't just philosophical, it was practical. Marcus began restructuring his business practices, implementing programs to support veteran employment, donating significant portions of his profits to military charities, and using his platform to raise awareness about veteran issues. His company, Chen Technologies, became a leading employer of former service members. But perhaps the most significant change came in his personal relationships. Marcus reached out to Eleanor Hartwell, the elderly woman he had been rude to at the palace. He discovered that her late husband had indeed been a Royal Marine, and her son was currently serving overseas. Marcus asked if he could honor her husband's memory with a donation to a military charity of her choosing. Eleanor, who had been following Marcus's journey through media coverage, was moved by his genuine transformation. "Mr. Chen," she said when they met for tea, "when I saw you that day at the palace, I saw a man who had lost his way. But watching your journey these past months, I see someone who has found something worth living for." Marcus also maintained regular contact with James Mitchell, the guard he had originally mocked. James had initially been skeptical of Marcus's commitment, but as the months passed, he began to see genuine change. They developed an unlikely friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. "You know, Mr. Chen," James said during one of their conversations, "what you did that day was wrong. But what you've done since then shows real character. It takes courage to admit you were wrong and work to make it right. The public reaction to Marcus's transformation was mixed but largely positive. Many people who had initially condemned him began to see his journey as an inspiring example of redemption and personal growth. His story became a case study in how consequences, when approached with genuine remorse and commitment, can lead to profound positive change. Social media, which had initially been brutal in its criticism, began to document and celebrate Marcus's progress. Videos of him participating in charity events for veterans, visiting wounded service members, and speaking about the importance of honoring military service went viral for positive reasons. But Marcus's journey wasn't without challenges. Some critics accused him of performing redemption for publicity, of trying to buy his way back into good graces. These accusations stung because they reminded him of his former self, the man who would have seen this entire experience as a publicity opportunity rather than a genuine transformation. To address these concerns, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He stepped down as CEO of Chen Technologies and took a position as a program coordinator for a veteran support organization, accepting a salary that was a fraction of his previous income. The move demonstrated that his commitment to service was genuine rather than calculated. Prince William, who had been monitoring Marcus's progress throughout the journey, invited him back to Buckingham Palace for a private meeting. The contrast between this visit and his previous one was stark. This time, Marcus approached the palace with humility and respect, understanding the honor of being invited. "Mr. Chen," Prince William said as they met in his office, "I've been following your progress these past months. I have to admit, I wasn't sure whether your commitment was genuine or simply a way to avoid legal consequences." Marcus nodded, understanding the skepticism. "Your Highness, I won't lie and say this journey started from pure motives. I was scared and desperate when you first offered me this alternative. But somewhere along the way, it became about more than avoiding punishment. It became about becoming a better person." Prince William studied Marcus carefully. "What do you think you've learned from this experience?" Marcus considered the question thoughtfully. "I learned that real strength isn't about power over others. It's about service to others. I learned that honor can't be bought or inherited. It has to be earned through action and sacrifice. Most importantly, I learned that my previous definition of success was empty. These service members have found something worth dedicating their lives to, and that's given their lives a meaning I never had." Prince William nodded approvingly. "And what will you do with these lessons?" "I want to spend the rest of my life trying to honor what I learned," Marcus replied. "I want to support veterans, educate others about military service, and try to live up to the example these men and women have set." As their meeting concluded, Prince William offered Marcus something unexpected: his forgiveness and recognition of his transformation. "Mr. Chen, you've shown that people can change, that consequences can lead to growth, and that redemption is possible. Your journey has been an inspiration to many people who have made their own mistakes." The final chapter of Marcus's story came full circle when he was invited to participate in a ceremony honoring military service. Standing in the same courtyard where his journey had begun, Marcus watched as Guard Mitchell and his unit performed their duties with the same professionalism and dignity that he had once mocked. But this time, Marcus understood what he was witnessing. He saw men and women who had dedicated their lives to something greater than themselves, who stood ready to sacrifice everything for people they would never know. He saw honor, duty, and service embodied in their steady presence and unwavering commitment. After the ceremony, James Mitchell approached Marcus, now not as a guard dealing with a disruptive tourist, but as one man greeting another with mutual respect. "Mr. Chen," James said, extending his hand, "it's good to see you again." Marcus shook James's hand, feeling the weight of the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Guard Mitchell, I want you to know that meeting you, even under those circumstances, was one of the most important moments of my life. You showed me what real dignity looks like, and you helped me find a better version of myself." James smiled, expression Marcus had never seen during their first encounter. "Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most difficult moments. You've honored the uniform and the service through your actions these past months." As Marcus left the palace that day, he reflected on the journey that had transformed him from an arrogant businessman into someone who understood the true meaning of service and sacrifice. His story had indeed gone viral, but as an inspiring tale of redemption rather than a moment of cruel entertainment. The man who had once sought to humiliate a royal guard had become someone who honored and supported military service. The tourist who had treated a war hero like a street performer had learned to see the dignity and honor in service to others. Most importantly, the person who had lived only for himself had discovered the joy and meaning that comes from dedicating one's life to something greater. Marcus Chen's moment of arrogance had cost him his old life, but it had given him something far more valuable: a new understanding of what it means to be truly successful. His story became a powerful reminder that our worst moments can sometimes lead to our best selves if we're willing to learn, grow, and change. The video that Marcus had originally intended to use to mock and humiliate a decorated soldier had instead become the beginning of one of the most inspiring redemption stories of the modern era. And in the end, that transformation had left everyone speechless, not because of the cruelty of his original actions, but because of the profound beauty of his eventual redemption.